All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about something that's literally flowing all around us, through our taps, our rivers, our oceans. It's water pollution. And understanding this silent crisis, that's the very first step toward actually doing something about it.
2 billion. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many people on this planet right now don't have access to safe, clean drinking water. This isn't some far-off problem we can just ignore. No, this is a massive global public health emergency, and it is happening as we speak.
So, what are we even talking about when we say water pollution? Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's when stuff gets into the water that just doesn't belong there. Think chemicals, waste, you name it. When that happens, the water quality tanks and it becomes toxic. Toxic for us and toxic for the entire environment. It's basically the poisoning of the one thing we literally can't live without.
Okay, so if we're going to tackle this thing, we've got to know where it's coming from, right? So where does all this contamination actually start? The answers might surprise you.
So experts usually break it down into two main categories. First up, you've got point source pollution. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. You can literally point to the source, like a single pipe coming out of a factory and just dumping gunk straight into a river. Easy to spot. But then there's the other kind, non-point source. And this one is way trickier. It's pollution that comes from all over the place, from a huge area. The classic example is runoff from farms. Fertilizers and pesticides from thousands of acres just washing into streams whenever it rains.
So who are the main offenders here? Well, just look at this breakdown. A huge, and I mean huge chunk of the problem is wastewater. We're talking about sewage from our own homes. Everything that goes down our sinks, showers, and toilets. Get this, over 30 billion tons of it gets dumped into our lakes and rivers every single year. It's just staggering.
And then, of course, there's the industrial side of things. Hold on to your hats for this one. A shocking 70% of all industrial waste is just dumped straight into our water. And a lot of the time, it's not even treated. We're not just talking about dirty water here. This is a literal toxic cocktail of heavy metals, nasty solvents, and all sorts of hazardous chemicals.
Now, all that contamination, all that junk, it has to go somewhere, right? It doesn't just magically vanish. Instead, it sets off this devastating ripple effect that hurts entire ecosystems. And yeah, it comes right back to harm us. And the human cost? It's almost unbelievable. Every single year, 250 million people, a quarter of a billion, get sick from diseases they get directly from contaminated water. And we're not talking about a little stomach bug. We're talking about deadly illnesses like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. To really see just how horrific this can get, I want to take you back in time to a story from Japan. It all started with something the locals just called the strange disease that was happening around Minamata Bay. It turns out the cause was a local factory that had been dumping industrial waste that was loaded with methyl mercury, into the bay for decades. That mercury got into the fish, which of course was what everyone there ate. By the 1950s, the effects were just horrifying. People were suffering from severe brain damage, paralysis, and delirium. And the worst part, the government didn't officially admit what was causing it until 1968. By that point, more than 50,000 people had been affected.
And as terrible as the Minamata story is, it wasn't a one-off thing. Around the same time, in a different part of Japan, another tragedy was unfolding. This time, it was mining operations leaking cadmium into rivers. That polluted water was then used to grow rice, which led to another mass poisoning event. This one with a truly unforgettable name, the Itai disease.
The name itself tells you the whole story. Itai. It literally translates to it hurts. It hurts. That's what people would cry out. See, the cadmium poisoning made their bones so fragile and weak that they would break under the slightest pressure, causing this just excruciating pain in their spine and joints. It's such a haunting name for a disaster that was completely 100% preventable.
So this all brings up a really important question, right? I mean, the factory wasn't just dumping barrels of pure mercury into the water. So how does a tiny amount of a chemical, released over time, become so incredibly deadly? Well, the answer is a sneaky process that happens quietly inside the food chain. Okay, so this process is called biomagnification, and this diagram here lays it out perfectly. It starts small, right? A little bit of a toxin, say mercury, gets into the water. Algae absorb it. No big deal yet. But then, little zooplankton come along and eat tons and tons of that algae. Suddenly, the toxin is more concentrated. Then a small fish eats a bunch of that plankton. Now it's even more concentrated. A bigger fish eats that small fish, and so on. You see what's happening? At every single step up the food chain, that poison gets more and more packed in until it reaches truly dangerous, even lethal levels in the animals at the top, which often includes us.
And look, this isn't just some textbook theory. We've seen this play out in the real world. A classic case was back in the 60s with the pesticide DDT. This exact thing happened. The DDT built up in the food chain until it reached predatory birds, like the bald eagle. And what it did to them was devastating. It made their eggshells so thin and brittle that they would literally crack when the parents tried to sit on them. This is one of the biggest reasons that America's national bird was pushed right to the edge of extinction.
Okay, I know this all sounds incredibly bleak, and it is, but the story doesn't have to end there. The really good news is that this isn't some unsolvable mystery. We know how to fix this. We already have the science and the tech we need to start turning the tide on water pollution.
So what's the game plan? Well, there's no single silver bullet. We have to hit it from all sides. First, we need to recycle and reuse our water, treating wastewater so it can be used for things like farming and industry. We've got to push for things like organic farming to cut down on all that fertilizer and pesticide runoff. We absolutely need to build more and better sewage treatment plants. And we can even help nature help itself by planting more trees to prevent soil from eroding into our waterways. Every single one of these steps is a piece of the puzzle.
And you know, human ingenuity plays a huge part here too. Industries can really lead the charge by completely rethinking what waste even is. Here's a cool example. Some companies are taking the ash from thermal power stations, which is usually a big pollutant, and are actually turning it into bricks for construction. How smart is that? It's all about shifting your mindset and seeing waste not as trash, but as a potential resource.
So when you boil it all down, the science is crystal clear, and the solutions are right there in front of us. The future of our water, our planet's most vital resource, it's not written in stone. It really is in our hands. It comes down to the choices that we all make, starting today. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we going to do?